Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Anderson, and my conversation today with you has a title. It's called What to Do When It Takes Longer Than You Can Stand. Now, I've been through a lot of crisis in my life. The first 25 years of my life were in general way of speaking, almost crisis free, but after that, they just kind of piled in and piled on year after year in as many ways as I can imagine. Some of them I created for myself, and some of them just seemed to appear. But in order to survive, I realized that I had to learn some techniques to get through these things, not just to survive, not just to survive, but to hopefully even be better than when I went into it. Now, let me just tell you a story. The story, I like to call it the shake and the snake. Now, in South Carolina, we would call it the sheik and the snake, but we don't pronounce Arabic really well in the South. So it's really a word that sounds close to shake and, of course, snake. So the story is that a man went on a long journey across the desert. And in the midst of this journey, he began to be incredibly thirsty. He ran out of water, and he kept going and kept going and kept going on his horse until finally he came to an oasis. And at the oasis, of course, there was a little pond of water, and he jumped off his horse and he threw himself into the water and drank everything he could. And then he found a palm tree and he just fell asleep under the palm tree. And then, as he was lying there, snoring, and his mouth was open, a poisonous snake came up and slithered into his throat and down into his body. And right as this was happening, it so occurred that a sheikh, which is an Arabic term for a very wise, spiritually wise man, also rode up on his horse and saw this event with the snake going into this man's mouth. He recognized what the problem was, so he ran over to the man and he woke him up, and he took the whip that he used on his horse and started to hit him and said, "Run around this pond and eat the mud, and run around and eat the mud, and run around and eat the mud." And the man wake up with this stinging whip on him, and it was so confusing to him. And he said, "Sheikh, why are you doing this?" He obviously recognized who the sheikh was, but he started to run. And then he said, "Now, eat the mud, eat the mud." And he kept hitting him and hitting him. And the man ran, and he ran, and he ran, and he ran, and he ate the mud, and he ate the mud. And then in exhaustion, when he couldn't take it anymore, he fell down and he threw up. And as soon as he threw up, the snake came out of his mouth. And he recognized the snake as a highly poisonous snake. And then, all of a sudden, he realized the sheikh was not torturing him. He was saving his life. And then the story goes, this is a 700-year-old Sufi story that I'm telling you. The story goes that the man became a disciple of the sheikh who saved his life from the snake. Now, I think there's a reason that this story has lasted 700 years or more. And it's because it speaks to all of us in the midst of difficulties. Now, when a difficulty occurs, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a war, whatever it is, a financial difficulty, a collapse of the market, whatever it is, in the midst of the difficulty, we almost never decide that somehow this has a purpose and a meaning greater than just the pain and the suffering that we're going through. Now, that's the average way. The common way of looking at catastrophe is to assume it doesn't have meaning. We just have to get through it and suffer with it, and maybe we can do something during the process to get better, and maybe we can't, but that's just too bad. It is what it is. There are some people who imagine, a small amount of us, I guess, or not of us, of people, I'm not one of them, who think maybe we're being punished. Now, I don't think that. What I think is something more like what happened with the sheikh and the man who swallowed the snake. And that is, in the moment, in the midst of the pain, we don't see the bigger picture. We don't see what might be interpreted more deeply, a way of understanding what's going on with us, what we're going through in a different way. And even, this is a transformed way to look at this. Even something that might save our lives. Even something that might turn us into entirely new people who are living our lives in a far better way. Because the story ended up with the man becoming the disciple of the sheikh. And in the context of the story, this was the best possible thing that could have ever happened to him. Because now his life, in that tradition, now his life is being guided by the highest possible spiritual wisdom. It could not be better for him than that. So he went from a man dying of thirst, unconscious, meaning sleeping, not paying attention to what was going on, and taking in unawares something that could have been the end of him. Something that was so toxic it could have killed him. And he took it in. There's no accident, I think, that this thing happened to him while he was asleep, meaning he wasn't aware, he was unconscious, which is sad to say. The general state of a large number of people. We walk around like robots thinking we're awake, but we're not, and we're not paying attention. We're not paying attention to what we're doing, what we're thinking, how we're living, and what's going on in our lives. And in that unconsciousness, we swallow things that are toxic to us. But maybe the shake doesn't come, and we suffer from it. We even die. So I'm offering you this story, which has been a meaningful story for me for many, many decades. I'm offering you the story to imagine that maybe in the midst of this crisis, we can all say to ourselves, I'm doing it with myself, what if there is a greater meaning and purpose in everything that goes on in our lives, and especially when it's difficult, especially when it's hard, especially when things are threatened, when the status quo, when what is safe seems to be unsafe, when what is productive seems to now be insecure and even crazy at times, when people are literally dying for something that we still don't fully understand and are not in complete confidence about how to protect ourselves from it. What if in the midst of that, we were willing and able to say, I'm willing to step back from the common everyday way of looking at this, and then after stepping back, step higher to a point of view where I can look into what's going on for the world, for myself, for everybody I'm going through this with, and say to myself, maybe life has meaning and purpose. And maybe, just maybe, because I'm so close to this, so caught up in it, and I've been so unconscious, I haven't seen that. But what if I ask the questions now? What could be the meaning and purpose of what I'm going through? Now, I've been doing that in my own life in the midst of a crisis, as said before, for decades. I'll be 75 years old in November. I've been doing this kind of questioning for over 50 years. And every single time I've gone into a crisis and I've asked myself these kinds of questions. What is the meaning and the purpose of this? How is it possible that it could be ultimately useful, productive, healing, and maybe even transforming for me? I've been willing to ask those questions. I have always come up with answers. I've always been given answers. I've always seen answers, experienced answers that even for the most difficult things I've been through, and I'm not going to make a list for you right now, but it's a big list and very significant. Without these meaningful, higher purpose ways of looking at the crises I have been through in my own life, I really don't think I would be here talking to you now. I don't think I would even be alive, because those kinds of questions, and especially the answers that they access, that they invite, have not just made me a survivor. I have thrived. I have been better than I was before. I am better than I was before. And for everything that harmed me, something that healed me emerged because I was willing to take a look. I was willing to have faith in the greater plan. I was willing to be a person who went to sleep underneath the palm tree and believed that the sheikh would come when I needed him. Now, I'm not special about that. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not special. I just made a decision. And the same kind of decision that I made, you can make. In the midst of this craziness, in the midst of this pain, in the midst of this difficulty, no matter who you are, you can decide to look for the meaning and the purpose of your own life. Now, once you do that, even if you do it a little bit, even if you have a small effort at it, you will get something from that that's much better for you than walking around feeling like a victim and feeling like crazy people are running the world and building resentment and anger and upset and pain, all of which is toxic to you, all of which is like a snake going down your throat and biting you from the inside. You can protect yourself from that if you say some things to yourself, if you come to a belief. Let go of your resistance, let go of your disbelief, and say to yourself, maybe there's a higher power with a higher purpose. And right now, I don't get it. Right now, maybe I feel like the guy running around the pond in the mud being hit. And maybe if you do that, you can get to the place where the crap comes out and the good, the beautiful, the transforming, the really unique gifts begin to emerge. Now, I have had this happen in my life dozens of times. And always, I first got to the place where I thought to myself, this is way longer than I can stand, much more than I can take. And I'm convinced that that happens to me, and it will happen to you also if it hasn't already. That happens because we need to get to that place where I can't stand it anymore, I can't take it, I fall down and something new happens. I get symbolically, sometimes even physically, on my knees. And what I've learned over the years is don't wait until that point. I get on my knees symbolically and sometimes physically before I get there. Before I get there. And so, to make this a little more brief, I've created a list of about 50 questions that you can ask yourself in the midst of this crisis that will help move you toward that kind of transformation, that kind of change, that kind of new awareness of who you are and what the purpose of this is. And if you do it with some energy, if you do it with some courage, if you do it with some deep honesty, it's just possible that that shake will appear in your life, will show up in your mind and your heart and say, here's the gift. Here's the release. Here's the safety. Here's the transformation. Here's the special thing that this is bringing to you in your life as you struggle through this very difficult event. Now, if you want the list, I'll be happy to send it to you. You need to email me. My email is dra@dracoach.com. dra@dracoach.com. Dr.A@dracoach.com. Take a moment to ask yourself, what if everything in my life, including and especially this difficulty, has a meaning and a purpose that can transform me and make everything about me even better than it was before it started. God bless you. Be well, be safe. Be blessed with the awareness of your meaning and your purpose in this life.